I'm sure most of us can agree that climate change has become an extremely partisan issue. If you are an environmentalist or if you advocate for climate change solutions, then you're a granola-eating liberal, and the Republican Party has kind of adopted this climate change denialism.
And you don't know whether or not that would have happened with or without man. You don't know.
Well, you're scientists at NOAA and
we have
NASA.
scientists that disagree with that.
And that wasn't always the case. In 1974, in Richard Nixon's State of the Union, he called for regulations on water and air pollution, and even stated that restoring nature to its natural state is a cause beyond party and beyond factions. It has become a common cause for all the people of this country. And then later went on to create the EPA, which is a huge environmental achievement. And then in the 80s, when George H.W. Bush was running for presidential election, when climate change was just coming into public consciousness, used his platform to bring attention to climate change. And he even stated,
"Today I'd like to begin to outline what I do about the environment, my plan for how we as a nation and as a people can lead the world to a new recognition of the importance of the environment. Some say these problems are too big, that it's impossible for an individual or even a nation as great as ours to solve the problem of global warming or the loss of forests or the deterioration of our oceans. My response is simple. It can be done, and we must do it. And these issues know no ideology, no political boundaries, not a liberal or a conservative thing we're talking about here today. They're of equal importance to the developing world and to the developed world. Just as they are the common heritage of the past and the present, they are the common agenda of the future. And in this world of rapid communications and growing population and global environmental problems, we're more tightly bound than ever, not only in this country, but in this world. We can instill a new spirit in the people of this country, a new appreciation for the land and the water, a conservation ethic. And this ethic, as I mentioned, is not an ethic that leads to no growth. It's not an ethic that leads to no opportunity. The ethic isn't a liberal ethic or a conservative ethic or a Republican ethic or a Democrat ethic. It's just plain common sense. Its condition demands our urgent attention. Its salvation can be our common triumph.
and now we're at this point where, the current president calls climate change a hoax, and either denying climate change altogether or rejecting its seriousness and need for immediate action has become kind of a checklist for, being a good Republican. Between the 80s and today, we have more scientific evidence that climate change is man-made and that we are raising the heat of the atmosphere, and that, by doing that, we are disrupting Earth's natural cycles, and this is already negatively impacting people and places all around the globe. We have all these catastrophic weather events that are happening. So what I thought would be more effective, since facts and science don't seem to be a convincing enough argument, to sit down and talk with people that either deny climate change altogether or just don't think it's as serious of a problem as most people do, and instead focus on the things that we have in common and when it comes to the environment, and focus on where we can agree. And I thought, what better people to do that with than my own family. My family is pretty conservative, very conservative. My family's very conservative. My grandpa was a representative in the Minnesota House for 2 decades. My uncle is now also a representative in the Minnesota House. My mother was a national delegate in 2016 for for Marco Rubio. So I thought they'd be a great place to start. I also think that talking with your family about climate change is an underutilized form of advocacy. You obviously have that rapport already with them, and I think allows them to break down their walls a little bit and better able to listen. And, actually, kinship-based altruism has been around for centuries. If you don't know what altruism is, it's just a selfless concern for others. So kinship-based altruism has allowed for cooperation between outsiders, things like arranged marriages, to form alliances. And I think I can use that kinship-based altruism to my advantage with my family because I'm close with my family. I'm hoping that I can be the person to connect them with outsiders or outside perspectives that they wouldn't typically listen to or trust. And I thought we could just have a discussion about climate change, and I could hear their points of view and their perspective, and they could hear what I had to say. And disclaimer, this did not go at all how I had pictured it going.
Trust me, let me start.
Do you want me to read your questions for you?
No, Morgan, continue, please.
It was a lot harder to lead a discussion than I thought, and it was a little more intimidating than I thought it was going to be, but stay tuned to see how it all unfolded.
Because I understand the question, it's an ethical question, right?
Yes.
It's about ethics. Do we have the right, or do we need to leave things alone? Is it our responsibility to let the Boundary Waters canoe area stand because of the way it is and leave it alone and not drill or not start a copper mine there? Okay? And in its natural state, anytime you mess with things, you mess with populations of animals. And I think that there has to be some kind of balance. Because of jobs, those people who are desperate in northern Minnesota for a job that can't even buy milk at the store. If we can come up with some kind of plan that leaves the Boundary Water sustainable as it is, and also injects tourism into it perhaps, or something. Yeah. But I don't think you can just say, nope, we're just gonna leave it alone. I think you've got to utilize it somehow.
The rise of automation, there's going to be millions of truckers losing their jobs. The most common job in the U.S. is retail jobs, and that's 80% females in their mid-30s. Malls are closing, and so you'll have these electric cars. They'll be automated. The environment will be better. Industry will save hundreds of millions of dollars a year, but you have people out of work. That kind of brings up what you were saying is, if we leave the boundary waters alone, we have these natural resources, there are jobs to be had, there's money to be made, put back in the economy. We have to find that balance. I think it's just inevitable that there are sacrifices that are going to be made. Industry is going to want to pay, is going to want to move forward. They're not going to care if they're paying someone an hourly wage. But with climate change, should we make those changes even though those jobs are going to be lost? If it's eventually going to happen anyways, are we delaying the inevitable? Maybe we need to come up with a solution.
Well, I think, I know my mom has talked about AOC's, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal a lot, and it's very radical. And I think, where we're at is we need a radical change, but what I like about, and people aren't going to be on board with that change is very hard, and it happens over a long period of time. But what I like about her Green New Deal is it's radical, but I think people are now talking about real solutions instead of.
Will you explain what that is?
Okay, just
basically restructuring air
Eliminate
travel.
the carbon footprint.
No,
That's what the bill is for. So it's supposed to be no more airplanes, no more cars that burn fuel, combustion engines got to go away.
No cows that fart.
Yep. So no
what?
cattle. We can't. That's not how it's set up. But it's trying to limit the carbon footprint and eliminate that.
That's
And some of the, I think it's probably over the top.
And that's
If anybody
extreme.
says, well, let's start this next year.
right.
That's not going to happen.
It's an aspirational goal
Right.
for
But
the nation to reduce the carbon footprint.
And the question I have then is, has this nation reduced the carbon footprint in the past 50 years or since 1920?
Well, certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly we
Burn
have.
less coal.
Look at it, burn less coal, even look at your cars. Are they more efficient? Absolutely, they've done a lot to change that. So I think the United States has gotten a lot better at the
But
carbon.
I don't think we've changed our consumption pattern to the point where that is outbalanced or counterbalanced between the good we've done and how much we consume. The question I think that each of us has to ask ourselves, and what we have to ask as a nation is, when is it time to say, we're really on the edge and we really have to do something drastically different to change the way we're consuming goods and resources. There's no end to the examples of cultures that have overconsumed their resource base to the point where they no longer exist. And we're on that path right now of overconsuming our resource base. That's the choice we face.
Yeah. So at this point, my phone ran out of storage space and stopped recording. But I also wanted to say again that, of course, having this discussion was a lot more difficult than I had anticipated with like organizing it. And I don't think I did a very good job with prepping my family before about kind of where I wanted the discussion to go. And I didn't do a good job of leading it in that direction, kind of like what I said earlier. I had prepared some questions that weren't very specific. I just planned on talking about climate change in general, and I kind of underestimated how broad and how many different places you could go with that. So I apologize if it seems a little all over the place. A lot of the things that I planned on talking about didn't even come up, and I didn't know how to take it in that direction. I was honestly pretty disappointed with how the whole thing went initially, but it ended up all working out. Obviously, we had a good discussion. But anyways, where it picks back up is a woman, she's a family friend, is just talking about the importance of talking to people with diverse perspectives and finding things that you have in common.
I just wanted to just make a comment. Morgan, I think what you're doing here is the change. And I see Joe at the Capitol all the time, and I run an agency, and I've had over 90 pieces of legislation passed, and I've seen more and more contention happen and more division happen than I ever have in my life. And so I'm taking a class that I just started, and it's called Peace Building and Mindfulness. Yeah. And it's about how do you really make change? And you can get laws passed, but if you don't change the hearts and minds, then it doesn't happen. And so I just have had my first weekend, and I've read a couple of 100 pages of the book. That's beautiful. But really, Morgan, that's what they said is going to make the change, is having people with diverse perspectives, finding how much they have in common. Every person here has said something beautiful about what they wanted to have change and sacrifice they're willing to make, but also wanting to make sure that brothers and sisters are all taken care of too. And what a beautiful place to be. Morgan, this is amazing. I can't believe I walked into this as such a gift. And how brave you are to do this, but how brave everybody has been to walk in and say what they would do, because everybody said that is important to them. And
We're just getting started.
I know.
I'm thinking that it has to come from in here. And I was thinking of World War II, when everybody went on stamps. You had stamps that you went to get, and those were little, like, rations, yeah. And how the whole country really pulled together, neighborhoods could pull together. And I think that you've hit on something. That's what we have lost in this country that's made this country great, is that we are one people and that we help one another. We have different ideas, different thoughts, but it doesn't mean we have to go against each other. We can work together, yeah.
We don't want a Great Depression level of catastrophe to happen before we all decide to pull together. Like,
well, no, I'm not.
No, I'm not saying that either. I'm just saying, like,
I think that could happen.
right, but that's
Because, like he was saying, putting food on the table, you have too many people out of jobs for being so extreme that more people need assistance. Then you have a small people working with other people on assistance. That's not the answer either, and I'm very strong on that too. People need assistance that need it, but then you have people that don't and are on assistance. And
there are always going to be people, no matter what system you put in place, that are going to take advantage of it.
I've read enough about economics that we need to transfer our economic system to more environmentally sound production and production systems, rather than coal and things like that. And we will create jobs, but there is a transition period, and during that transition period, we need to provide training for people to make the transition and possibly assistance to make that transition. I totally agree with that. You can't just leave people hanging when you're in transition. One of the things that I was thinking of is in the play tonight, when the point was made, or in the discussion afterwards, about how, KJ was probably the focal point of the opposite political viewpoint of the four nuns. And he was the most articulate one of the guys who, or the men of the family. But what was interesting was that in kind of the closing thing, there was still a love that never, or it always transcended their conflict. And that's the thing I think we need to remember, is that there can be conflict, and if you respect the people you have conflict with and keep talking to them, you'll work it out. When you start marginalizing those people and saying they're worthless, they're whatever, and you totally negate what they say, then you're going to get in trouble. And that was the beauty of what I...
So that's how the discussion pretty much ended. We were at the restaurant pretty late talking about climate change, which was awesome. Everyone seemed pretty engaged, even though some of the more conservative members of my family didn't participate as much as I had anticipated. It was overall a really good discussion, and when we were all done, they all seemed really interested in what we were talking about. And over the next few weeks, I got calls from cousins and my grandma about some of the research that they had done on their own, and me and my uncle, who wasn't actually a part of this discussion, but actually, because he couldn't be a part of it, invited me to the Capitol to interview some legislators about climate change, and I also videotaped that, so I will attach a link to that video too. But we continue to talk about climate change, and he sends me his side of the argument and I send him mine, and we talked about it at Easter. So I also made a survey for everyone that participated to take, just to kind of check back in a few weeks later to see what it accomplished. So I asked 4 questions. The first one: did you continue to talk about climate change issues with others after our discussion, or do your own research when you got home? And 100% yes, so that's good. Did the discussion change your perspective on climate change? 60% said yes, and 40% said no. So it doesn't show me on here who said what, but that's cool, I didn't know that. And then I asked, what did you take away from our discussion? And I'll leave some of those out, but basically they're pretty general. The complexity of climate change, that a lot needs to be done to save our Earth, greater awareness about the problems and eagerness to be a good steward of the environment. Being that it was my family actually increased my interest to listen and learn. That I love my niece and I'm proud of her. So that's cool. Do you think the fact that we are all family allowed you to become more understanding / empathetic to opposing perspectives? And it was a unanimous 100% yes. So I didn't expect to change anyone's minds with one discussion. My goal was kind of just to pique curiosity, and also to hopefully when they're out in their communities or hearing something on TV, they're more willing to listen to people on the other side of their argument, and maybe think differently about climate change issues and not see it as such a politically polarizing topic. And I think that I did that. It's my family and they all love me, so I'm sure they're all just saying what I want them to say. But no, I really think the fact that we're all related allowed them to just break down any walls that were built up about the issue. And my whole purpose of making this video was hopefully to encourage other people to talk to people in their community, or talk to your own family about climate change, and have a better ability to understand why they view things the way they do. And we all have different life experiences that shape how we view the world and how we believe things should be accomplished. And so I think it's important to always take that into consideration instead of demonizing the other side and just discounting them as stupid, because I think at the end of the day we all care about the environment. And we all want to leave the world a better place than we found it. And so I think instead of debating the facts, we should just focus on what we all have in common and what we all agree on, and then we can start working towards some solutions.
Pastrami!
Pastrami!
Pass the deli on this pastrami, please.
Missing someone.